My friends, tonight I want to begin with a declaration, and I want you to write this down because this is the foundation upon which everything else will stand. Your goal is not the problem. Your system is the problem. Many people are frustrated, disappointed, confused, and discouraged, not because they lack goals, but because they're trying to achieve goals without understanding the laws that govern results. You have dreams, you have desires, you have plans, you have visions, but desire without order produces disappointment. Dreams without discipline create delusion, and vision without systems becomes frustration. Let me say it another way. Goals do not respond to wishes. Goals respond to laws. Life does not respond to need. Life responds to knowledge. The universe does not negotiate with passion. It enforces principles. And this is why many sincere people fail, not because they are evil, not because God is against them, not because the devil is too strong, but because they are violating laws they do not understand. Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Notice, God did not say they are destroyed for lack of prayer or lack of fasting or lack of sincerity. He said lack of knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of how life works. Now listen carefully. Success is predictable. Please write that down. Success is not an accident, and failure is not a mystery. Both are outcomes of obedience or disobedience to laws. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 is often misquoted, but it does not say all things work together for everybody. It says all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. In other words, alignment with purpose activates cooperation in creation. When you function according to purpose, creation helps you. When you function outside of purpose, creation resists you. The problem with our culture is that we have been trained to pursue results instead of understanding systems. We chase money instead of mastering value. We chase success instead of submitting to discipline. We chase titles instead of developing character. We chase applause instead of competence. And then we ask God to bless what we refuse to organize. But hear me clearly tonight. God does not bless chaos. God blesses order. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 verse 40 says, "Let all things be done decently and in order." Why? Because order is heaven's language. Disorder is a sign of rebellion against design. I want you to hear this statement carefully. If you want a different future, you must submit to a different set of laws. You cannot keep the same habits, the same mindset, the same relationships, the same schedule, the same discipline level, and expect a different outcome. That is not faith, that is presumption. Galatians chapter 6 verse 7 says, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." Notice, God did not say, "I will decide what you reap." He said the harvest is automatic. The seed determines the future. The law guarantees the outcome. Many people think God is withholding their breakthrough, but the truth is God has already finished his part. Genesis chapter 1 verse 28 tells us that God blessed mankind and said, "Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion." That blessing was not emotional encouragement. It was an authorization to operate within laws. Dominion does not come from prayer alone. Dominion comes from understanding how things work. Dominion is the reward of competence. Dominion is the result of alignment. Dominion is proof that you are functioning according to design. Let me say something that may challenge you, but it will liberate you if you understand it. This session is not about motivation. It is about instruction. Motivation excites you for a moment. Instruction changes your future. You don't need someone to shout at you. You need someone to explain life to you. Jesus never motivated people emotionally. He taught them laws. That's why he said in Matthew chapter 7 verse 24, "Whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock." Wisdom, my friends, is not emotion. Wisdom is application of truth. Here is the governing statement for this entire teaching, and I want you to capture it because everything we will discuss flows from this one truth. If you want to achieve any goal, you must stop asking God to change your outcome and start allowing God to change your system. Your future is not a prayer request. It is a product of principles. Psalm 127 verse 1 says, except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. Notice, it does not say they do not labor. It says they labor in vain. Why? Because God was not the architect of the system. Tonight, I am not here to inspire you to dream bigger. I am here to teach you how to function correctly. Because when you understand the laws of the kingdom, you don't have to beg for results. Results pursue you. Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 2 says, and all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessings overtake those who obey laws. Success chases those who submit to order. So settle in, open your mind, and be willing to unlearn what culture taught you and relearn what the kingdom demands. Because by the end of this teaching, you will understand this simple but life-changing truth. Your life is not out of control. It is perfectly aligned with the laws you are currently obeying. Now, before we go any further, I must slow down and do something very important, because confusion in life always begins with confusion in definitions. If you define a thing incorrectly, you will misuse it, abuse it, or completely misunderstand it. This is why many people are busy but not productive, active but not effective, spiritual but not successful. They are sincere, but they are sincerely wrong because they are using the wrong definitions. So tonight we are going to define our terms, not according to culture, not according to tradition, but according to the mind of the manufacturer. Let us begin with the word goal. A goal is not a wish. A goal is not a prayer request. A goal is not something you hope will happen someday. A goal is a specific target, a clearly defined destination that demands structure, discipline, and direction. A goal is measurable, timed, and intentional. Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 2 says, write the vision and make it plain, that he may run that readeth it. Notice, God did not say feel the vision or talk about the vision. He said write it. Why? Because anything not defined cannot be managed, and anything not managed will never multiply. However, here is where most people fail. They set goals without asking the most important question, why? And that brings us to the next definition, purpose. Purpose is not what you do. Purpose is why you were born. Purpose is the original intent of the Creator for the creation. Purpose precedes production, and purpose determines function. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee. That means your life is not an accident. You were not a mistake. You were not a coincidence. You were conceived with intention, designed with precision, and sent with assignment. Please write this down. Where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. When you do not know why you were created, you will pursue what looks good instead of what fits. You will chase popularity instead of purpose. You will copy other people's goals and wonder why you are miserable. Purpose is the reference point for all legitimate goals. Any goal that is not anchored in purpose will eventually produce frustration, exhaustion, and confusion. That is why Proverbs chapter 19 verse 21 says, there are many devices in a man's heart, nevertheless the counsel of the Lord that shall stand. In other words, you can plan all you want, but only purpose will survive time. Now let us define success, because this word has been abused, corrupted, and polluted by culture. Success is not money. Success is not fame. Success is not popularity. Success is not comparison. Success is not beating somebody else. Success, according to the kingdom, is the progressive fulfillment of purpose. Let me say that again slowly. Success is the progressive fulfillment of purpose. That means success is not a destination. It is a journey of obedience. You can be successful without being famous, and you can be famous and still be a failure. Why? Because heaven does not measure your life by applause. Heaven measures your life by assignment. Jesus was successful at age 12 when he said, wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business. He had not preached a sermon yet. He had not performed a miracle yet. He had not been crucified yet. But he was already successful because he was aligned with purpose. Luke chapter 16 verse 15 says, for that which is highly esteemed among men is abomination in the sight of God. Heaven's measurement system is different from earth's measurement system. Earth rewards visibility, heaven rewards obedience. Now, to fully understand goals, purpose, and success, we must define the kingdom, because the kingdom is the environment in which all these things function correctly. The kingdom of God is not a religion. The kingdom of God is not a denomination. The kingdom of God is not a church building. The kingdom is the governing influence of a king over territory, impacting it with his will, his intent, and his laws. That is why Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 verse 33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Notice, he did not say seek success first. He did not say seek money first. He did not say seek achievement first. He said seek the system first. Religion trains people to hope. The kingdom trains people to function. Religion teaches you to wait on God. The kingdom teaches you to work with God. Religion emphasizes miracles. The kingdom emphasizes laws. And this is why many people are disappointed. They are trying to achieve kingdom results with religious thinking. But Romans chapter 12 verse 2 says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation does not come by prayer alone. Transformation comes by new understanding. Here is a critical statement, and I want you to capture it. You don't need more prayer, you need more understanding. Prayer is communication. Understanding is comprehension of laws. Jesus never prayed that the blind would see and then walk away. He understood authority, dominion, and alignment. He said in John chapter 14 verse 10, the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. That is kingdom partnership alignment producing results. So when you set goals in the kingdom, you are not trying to impress God. You are not trying to prove anything to people. You are not trying to compete. You are submitting to a system that already works. The kingdom of God is not experimental. It is established. Psalm 119 verse 89 says, forever, O Lord, thy word is settled in heaven. That means the laws are fixed, the outcomes are predictable, and your future is not a gamble, it is a consequence. Once you understand these definitions, you will stop chasing everything and start pursuing the right thing. You will stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, why was I born? And when that question is answered, your goals will no longer confuse you. They will organize you. Now listen to me very carefully, because what I am about to share with you is the reason why many people are tired, frustrated, burned out, and yet still unfulfilled. Here is the law, and I want you to write it down exactly as I say it. A goal that is not born out of purpose will never produce peace. You can achieve it, you can accomplish it, you can reach it, and still feel empty. Why? Because peace is not a reward for achievement. Peace is a confirmation of alignment. Isaiah chapter 48 verse 17 says, thus saith the Lord thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, I am the Lord thy God, which teacheth thee to profit, which leadeth thee by the way that thou shouldest go. Notice what God connects here. Profit and direction. God teaches you how to succeed by leading you in the right way, not just any way. Many people are profitable but miserable because they are successful in a direction God never assigned. Let me say something that may unsettle you, but it will heal you if you receive it. Not every good goal is a God goal. Some goals are socially approved, culturally celebrated, and financially rewarded, but spiritually misaligned. That is why Proverbs chapter 3 verse 6 says, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. It does not say he will bless all your ways. It says he will direct your ways. Direction precedes provision. Alignment precedes peace. The greatest deception of this age is comparison. People look at other people's results and borrow their goals without ever asking about their assignment. But Galatians chapter 6 verse 4 says, let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. In other words, your fulfillment is not found in imitation. It is found in obedience. When you chase someone else's dream, you abandon your own design. Here's how you know a goal is misaligned. It requires constant self-force. You have to drag yourself into it. You have to motivate yourself unnaturally. You have to keep convincing yourself that this is what you want. Let me help you tonight. Purpose pulls. Confusion pushes. When a goal is aligned with purpose, discipline becomes natural. When a goal is outside of purpose, even rest makes you tired. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, 29, Jesus says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That does not mean purpose is effortless. It means purpose is fit. Let me define alignment for you. Alignment is when your thinking, desire, action, and environment agree with why you were created. Alignment is harmony between your design and your direction. When alignment is present, peace becomes a byproduct. Colossians chapter 3 verse 15 says, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts." The word rule there means to act as an umpire to decide what is right and what is wrong. If you lose peace while chasing a goal, that is not the devil attacking you, that is heaven warning you. Many people ignore peace because peace does not shout. Peace whispers, but anxiety screams, pressure screams, comparison screams, and people follow the loudest voice instead of the truest witness. But Romans chapter 8 verse 16 says, "The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit." Witness is quiet confidence. Witness is inner agreement. Witness is alignment. Here is a critical question you must learn to ask before committing to any goal. Does this goal increase my value or only my visibility? Purpose always adds value. Ego seeks visibility. When Jesus came to earth, he spent 30 years in obscurity and only 3 years in visibility. Why? Because value precedes exposure. Luke chapter 2 verse 52 says, "And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man." Increase came before influence. Growth came before recognition. Now let me give you the test of alignment. Any goal that is aligned with purpose will do 4 things. First, it will energize you even when it challenges you. Second, it will require growth, not compromise. Third, it will serve others, not just yourself. And fourth, it will produce peace even in pressure. James chapter 3 verse 17 says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable." Peace is always first when wisdom is present. Many people ask God to bless goals He never authorized. But Psalm 37 verse 4 gives us the correct order. "Delight thyself also in the Lord, and He shall give thee the desires of thine heart." That does not mean He gives you whatever you want. It means He reshapes your desires until they match His intent. Alignment changes appetite. When purpose is discovered, confusion loses power. So tonight, I challenge you, do not ask how big is my goal, ask how aligned is my goal. Because size does not guarantee significance. Faithfulness to assignment does. And when your goal flows out of purpose, you no longer chase success. Success begins to cooperate with you. Remember this and never forget it. Peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the presence of alignment. Now listen very carefully, because if you miss this step, everything else I teach you tonight will become noise. Purpose is not one step among many. Purpose is the foundation of all steps. If you get this wrong, you can be disciplined, consistent, hardworking, intelligent, and still fail, because effort without purpose is wasted energy. Let me say it clearly and boldly. The first key to achieving any goal is not planning, it is purpose. Purpose answers the most important question of your life. Why was I born? Until that question is answered, you will misuse your time, abuse your energy, and misdirect your goals. Proverbs chapter 20 verse 5 says, "Counsel in the heart of man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out." Purpose is already inside you. God placed it there before you arrived on earth. Your responsibility is not to invent purpose, but to discover it. Let me define purpose again so there is no confusion. Purpose is the original intent of the Creator for the creation. Purpose precedes production. That means God decided why you were needed before He decided when you would be born. Psalm 139 verse 16 says, "All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." In other words, you were born with an assignment already written. Your life is not random. It is scripted by design. Now here's a law you must understand. Purpose determines function. You do not decide what a thing is for. The Creator does. If you want to know the purpose of a product, you do not ask the product, you ask the manufacturer. That is why Romans chapter 9 verse 20 says, shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? You do not argue with purpose, you submit to it. Submission to purpose is the beginning of success. This is why Jesus never struggled with identity or direction. He said in John chapter 18 verse 37, for this cause was I born, and for this cause came I into the world. Notice his clarity. He did not say, I think this is what I should do. He said, for this cause. When purpose is clear, confusion is eliminated. When assignment is known, distraction loses power. Many people are asking God to bless what they are doing, when they should be asking God what they should be doing. Let me say that again, because this will save you years of frustration. Stop asking God to bless your plans. Ask God to reveal his purpose. Psalm 127 verse 1 says, except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. Vain labor is effort without purpose. You can be busy and still be barren. Now, how do you discover purpose? Purpose is not discovered in isolation. It is discovered through observation. You must observe yourself honestly. What are your natural gifts? What problems disturb you? What issues do you feel compelled to solve? What do you do effortlessly that others find difficult? Romans chapter 11 verse 29 says, for the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. That means God does not take back what he placed in you. Your clues are permanent. Purpose is also revealed through burden. Whatever burdens you consistently is connected to your assignment. Nehemiah could not ignore the broken walls of Jerusalem because rebuilding was his purpose. Esther could not ignore the threat to her people because preservation was her assignment. Jeremiah said, his word was in my heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. That fire was purpose demanding expression. Let me help you tonight. Purpose is not necessarily what makes you money. It is what makes you valuable. Money follows value. Provision follows purpose. Matthew chapter 6 verse 8 says, your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. When you are aligned with assignment, provision becomes predictable. God does not sponsor confusion. He funds purpose. Now listen carefully to this statement, because it is a law. You were not created to do everything. You were created to do one thing well. Excellence comes from focus. Focus is proof of understanding. Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 10 says, if the axe be dull and he do not whet the edge, then must he put to more strength. But wisdom is profitable to direct. Purpose sharpens effort. Without purpose, you work harder and achieve less. Here's the danger of not knowing your purpose. You become addicted to comparison. You start measuring your life against other people's achievements. But comparison is a sign of identity confusion. Galatians chapter 1 verse 10 asks, do I seek to please men? For if I yet please men, I should not be the servant of Christ. Purpose frees you from people's opinions because it anchors you in divine intent. Let me say this gently but firmly. If you must force yourself to live a life, you were not designed for it. Purpose may demand discipline, but it will never demand self-betrayal. When you are in purpose, even your sacrifices feel meaningful. Even your struggles feel purposeful. Even your waiting has direction. So the first kingdom step toward achieving any goal is this: discover your assignment. Before you set goals, clarify purpose. Before you plan, align. Before you pursue, submit. Because when purpose is known, discipline becomes natural, focus becomes easy, and success becomes inevitable. Never forget this: when purpose is discovered, abuse is impossible. Now listen to me very carefully, because this principle determines whether your purpose will ever leave your spirit and enter your reality. You cannot go to what you cannot see. Write that down. No one ever arrives at a future they cannot first perceive. Life moves in the direction of your strongest image, not your strongest desire. Desire says, I want it. Perception says, I see it. And only what you see consistently will you pursue faithfully. Perception is not imagination in the childish sense. Perception is vision informed by purpose. Vision is the capacity to see the future with clarity and conviction before it arrives. Proverbs chapter 29 verse 18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. That word perish does not mean die. It means to lose restraint, to live without discipline, to drift aimlessly. When vision is absent, discipline collapses. When vision is present, sacrifice makes sense. Let me say this clearly. God will never take you to a place your mind has never visited. Many people are praying for a future they refuse to picture. They are asking God to bless what they have not defined. But God always reveals before he releases. He always shows before he sends. Genesis chapter 13, verse 14, 15, God said to Abraham, lift up now thine eyes, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it. Not what you desire, not what you pray about, what you see. Perception is the bridge between purpose and manifestation. Purpose tells you why you exist. Perception shows you how that purpose will look when fully expressed. That is why Habakkuk was told not just to receive the vision, but to write it. Writing forces clarity. Writing disciplines imagination. Writing turns vision into instruction. Anything you cannot describe clearly, you cannot pursue effectively. Now, here is why many people fail at this step. They keep seeing their past while praying for a future. Their language is future, but their pictures are historical. They say they want progress, but their self-image is still rooted in yesterday's failures, limitations, and labels. But Isaiah chapter 43, verse 18, 19 says, remember ye not the former things. Behold, I will do a new thing. You cannot see a new thing with an old image. You must update your perception to match your purpose. Let me help you understand how perception works. Perception shapes behavior, behavior shapes habits, habits shape character, and character shapes destiny. This is why discipline is not sustained by willpower, it is sustained by vision. When vision is clear, discipline is no longer a burden, it becomes a tool. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 2 says, looking unto Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. Notice Jesus endured pain because he saw purpose beyond it. Vision makes endurance reasonable. Here is a law you must understand. The evidence of vision is discipline. People who truly see their future organize their present, they manage their time, they choose their associations carefully. They say no easily. Vision simplifies decision making. When you know where you are going, you stop negotiating with distractions. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 25, 26 says, let thine eyes look right on, ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Focus produces stability. Perception must be detailed. Vague vision produces vague effort. You must see not only the destination, but the environment, the habits, the routine, the skills, and the character required to sustain that future. God does not promote people to futures they are not prepared to maintain. Preparation is proof of belief. Noah did not just believe God, he built an ark. His actions matched his perception. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 7 says, by faith Noah prepared an ark. Faith that sees always prepares. Let me challenge you tonight. What do you see when you close your eyes? Do you see excuses or do you see solutions? Do you see obstacles or do you see opportunities? Do you see yourself surviving or do you see yourself serving at a higher level? Your perception will decide your pursuit. Romans chapter 8 verse 29 tells us that God predestined us to be conformed to the image of his son. God works with images. Heaven thinks in pictures. If your perception is weak, your perseverance will collapse under pressure. That is why God often delays manifestation. He is strengthening perception. He wants the picture to become so clear that opposition cannot erase it. Joseph endured betrayal, slavery, and prison because he never lost the picture of the dream. Genesis chapter 37 verse 5 says, Joseph dreamed a dream. That dream governed his discipline for years. So the second kingdom step to achieving any goal is this: see it before you seize it. Build a clear, disciplined, purpose-driven image of the future. Visit it daily in your mind. Organize your present around it. Speak according to it, and refuse to let your past repaint your perception. Remember this and write it down. Vision is not optional. Vision is law. Now listen very carefully, because if you fail at this step, you will spend your entire life negotiating with fear, shrinking your vision, and apologizing for greatness. Potential is the hidden ability deposited by God that demands development. Write that down. Potential is not performance. Potential is not history. Potential is not what people say about you. Potential is what God placed inside you when He created you. Let me define potential so there is no misunderstanding. Potential is unused ability. It is what you can become but have not yet become. It is what you can do but have not yet done. And here is the danger. People judge you by your current performance, but God measures you by your capacity. That is why Romans chapter 8 verse 11 says, the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwelleth in you. If resurrection power lives in you, then your limitation is not internal, it is mental. Here is a law you must understand. Your potential is always greater than your present expression. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 8 says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. God never finishes where He starts. Everything God creates begins as seed. Seeds do not look like forests, but forests are hidden in seeds. You are more than what you currently see in the mirror. Now, let me say something that may unsettle you, but it will free you if you receive it. Most people live far below their potential because they believe other people's opinions more than God's assessment. Family, teachers, culture, and past failures have spoken over your life, and you've accepted those words as truth. But Numbers chapter 23 verse 19 says, God is not a man that He should lie. If God says you are able, then every contrary voice is illegal. Potential responds to belief and development. Belief activates confidence. Development activates competence. Confidence without competence is arrogance. Competence without confidence is frustration. God expects both. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 6 says, stir up the gift of God which is in thee. Notice, God does not stir it up for you, you must. Potential neglected becomes frustration. Potential developed becomes dominion. Let me help you identify the enemies of potential. The first enemy is fear, and fear is not courage's opposite. Fear is ignorance. When you don't know what you carry, you protect yourself instead of expressing yourself. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says, God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Fear leaves when understanding arrives. The second enemy of potential is environment. Potential is like seed. It needs the right soil. You cannot develop greatness in a toxic environment and expect to flourish. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 13 that some seed failed not because it was bad seed, but because the ground was wrong. Change ground and the same seed produces abundance. Your environment must match your assignment. The third enemy of potential is comparison. Comparison is an insult to the Creator. When you compare yourself to others, you imply God made a mistake with you. But Psalm 139 verse 14 says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderfully made means custom design. You are not inferior, you are different. And difference is the foundation of value. Now here's the law that governs potential. Potential demands preparation before promotion. God will never expose what He has not first developed. Jesus spent 30 years preparing and only 3 years demonstrating. Why? Because longevity requires depth. Luke chapter 16 verse 10 says, he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. Faithfulness is training for expansion. Potential also demands skill acquisition. Skills are learned at laws applied repeatedly. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 29 says, seest thou a man diligent in his business, he shall stand before kings. Kings do not reward intention, they reward competence. Excellence is the result of trained potential, and excellence attracts opportunity. Let me say this clearly so there's no confusion. You must believe in your potential more than people believe in you. God never asked the crowd for permission to promote you. David was anointed in a field while his brothers were ignored. Joseph was favored in prison while his circumstances contradicted his dream. Gideon was called a mighty man while hiding in fear. Why? Because God speaks to capacity, not condition. So the third kingdom step toward achieving any goal is this: commit to developing what God deposited. Stop waiting for approval. Stop negotiating with doubt. Stop rehearsing past failures. Begin the discipline of growth. Read, train, practice. Submit to instruction. Because potential that is developed becomes power, and power that is focused produces success. Remember this and write it down. God never calls the qualified. He qualifies the called through development. Now listen very carefully, because this step explains why some people endure pressure while others collapse, why some people remain consistent while others quit, and why some people finish while others fade away. Passion is not excitement. Passion is sustained energy for purpose. Write that down. Passion is not noise. Passion is not hype. Passion is not emotion. Passion is the internal fire that keeps you moving when no one is clapping, when results are slow, and when obedience becomes costly. Passion is evidence that you have discovered something you are willing to give your life to. In fact, the word passion comes from a root word that means to suffer willingly for a cause. That is why Jesus described in Isaiah chapter 53 as a man acquainted with grief. Yet Hebrews chapter 12 verse 2 tells us that for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. Passion gave him endurance. Passion made pain meaningful. Passion gave him the strength to obey when obedience demanded sacrifice. Here is a law you must understand. When you are operating in purpose, passion becomes natural. You do not have to beg yourself to show up. You do not have to negotiate with discipline every morning. You may get tired, but you will not quit. Why? Because passion is the fuel of assignment. Jeremiah said in Jeremiah chapter 20 verse 9, his word was in my heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. That fire was passion, purpose, demanding expression. Many people claim they have no passion, but the truth is they are simply living outside their assignment. Passion does not disappear. It goes dormant when purpose is ignored. That is why boredom is not a personality problem. It is a purpose problem. When you are disconnected from why you were born, life feels heavy. But when you are aligned, even work feels worship. Colossians chapter 3 verse 23 says, and whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. Heartily means with passion. Now let me make this clear so you do not misunderstand me. Passion does not remove discipline. Passion fuels discipline. Passion does not replace process. It empowers process. People who rely only on motivation will fail, but people who are driven by passion will endure. Motivation comes and goes, passion stays. Motivation is external, passion is internal. Galatians chapter 2 verse 20 says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. That is passion, identity, fused with assignment. Here is another law you must write down. The most dangerous person on earth is a person who has discovered why they were born. Dangerous not in a violent sense, but in an unstoppable sense. They cannot be intimidated easily. They cannot be distracted cheaply. They cannot be silenced by rejection. Because when purpose becomes personal, perseverance becomes inevitable. Nehemiah said, I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. Passion creates focus. Passion also reveals ownership. People protect what they are passionate about. They invest in it. They refine it. They defend it. They nurture it. That is why Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 verse 21, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Passion follows investment, and investment follows purpose. When you truly own the assignment, you give it your best energy, not your leftovers. Let me help you identify whether your goal is fueled by passion or pressure. Pressure drains you. Passion drives you. Pressure produces resentment. Passion produces resilience. Pressure requires constant external validation. Passion is satisfied with internal obedience. Pressure makes you ask, when will this be over? Passion makes you ask, how can I do this better? 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 says, know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that ye may obtain. Passion determines how you run. Passion must be protected. It is threatened by wrong environments, wrong people, and wrong priorities. That is why Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 6, to stir up the gift. Passion is not self-sustaining. It must be cultivated through prayer, discipline, learning, and alignment. When passion is neglected, even purpose begins to feel heavy. So the fourth kingdom step toward achieving any goal is this: ignite and protect your passion. Reconnect with your why. Define your cause in one sentence. Remind yourself daily why this goal matters. Feed your spirit with truth. Guard your energy, because passion is not optional. It is the fuel that carries purpose through process. Never forget this truth. If the vision does not move you, it will never move through you. Now listen very carefully, because this step determines whether your vision survives success. Many people think failure kills dreams. No. Success without principles destroys more visions than failure ever could. Failure humbles you. Success tests your character. That is why principles are not optional, accessories to purpose. They are protective laws that guard your assignment. A principle is a fundamental truth that governs behavior and produces predictable outcomes. Principles are not opinions. They are not preferences. They are not cultural trends. Principles are laws. And laws, whether obeyed or ignored, always work. Galatians chapter 6 verse 7 says, be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. That is a principle. It works for saints and sinners alike. You see, vision shows you where to go, but principles determine how you get there. Passion gives you energy, but principles give you restraint. Without principles, passion becomes dangerous. A man with vision but no principles will sacrifice integrity for speed. A woman with gifts but no principles will compromise values for applause. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 25 warns us, there is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Principles prevent you from choosing the wrong way while pursuing the right goal. Let me say this plainly. God does not bless goals. He blesses obedience to principles. Many people pray for outcomes while violating laws. But prayer never replaces principle. You cannot fast your way out of disobedience. You cannot shout your way past the law. Joshua chapter 1 verse 8 does not say pray for success. It says observe to do according to all the law, then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Success is self-made through obedience. Principles also bring predictability to life. When you live by principles, you remove confusion, you remove guesswork, you remove instability. Psalm 119 verse 105 says, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. A lamp does not remove the journey, it clarifies the steps. Principles tell you what to do when emotions are loud and circumstances are unclear. Now, here's the truth many people do not like to hear. Principles limit you in order to protect you. Every law restricts behavior for the sake of preservation. Traffic laws limit speed so life can be sustained. Moral laws limit desire so destiny can be fulfilled. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7 verse 24, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. Principles determine what your life is built on. Notice something powerful. Storms did not differentiate between the wise man and the foolish man. Both houses were tested. The difference was not prayer, prophecy, or confession. The difference was obedience to principles. One obeyed, one ignored. When pressure comes, and it will principles decide survival. Principles also preserve your future self from your present impulses. That is why Joseph ran from Potiphar's wife. He did not argue. He did not negotiate. He did not pray. He ran. Why? Because a man without principles negotiates with temptation, but a man with principles escapes it. Genesis chapter 39 verse 9 records Joseph saying, "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Principles are strongest when no one is watching. Here's another law you must write down. Vision attracts opportunity, but principles determine what opportunities you accept. Not every open door is a God door. Some doors open to test your discipline, not to promote your destiny. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 23 says, "All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient." Principles help you say no to good things so you can say yes to the right things. When principles govern your life, you stop being controlled by moods, crowds, and convenience. You become stable. You become trustworthy. You become consistent. That is why God looks for stewards, not stars. Luke chapter 16 verse 10 says, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much." Faithfulness is not talent. It is principled behavior over time. So the fifth kingdom step toward achieving any goal is this: establish non-negotiable principles that govern your decisions, actions, and relationships. Decide in advance what you will not compromise. Decide before temptation shows up. Decide before pressure comes. Because when principles are settled, decisions become easy. Never forget this: your gift may take you up, but only your principles will keep you there. Now hear me carefully, because this step separates dreamers from builders. Vision shows you the destination, but planning determines whether you ever arrive. Many people claim they are waiting on God, when in reality, God is waiting on their plan. Heaven responds to structure. God does not fund confusion. He supports order. Planning is the process of converting purpose into procedures. It is the discipline of breaking the invisible into visible steps. Planning is faith expressed intelligently. Luke chapter 14 verse 28 says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether ye have sufficient to finish it?" Notice the words, "sit it down first." That is planning. God considers planning wisdom, not doubt. Let me correct a dangerous misconception. Planning does not limit God. Planning honors God. When Noah received instructions to build the ark, God gave measurements, materials, timelines, and capacity. Genesis chapter 6 is a blueprint, not a prayer meeting. God did not say, "Noah, just believe and the ark will appear." He said, "Make thee an ark of gopher wood." Obedience required structure. Here is a law you must understand. Where there is no plan, potential remains in prison. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 5 declares, "The plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty." Haste is not speed. Haste is movement without strategy. Planning slows you down initially so you can move faster later. Planning also reveals priorities. Anything that matters gets scheduled. Anything unscheduled becomes optional. That is why Jesus often withdrew to pray, not randomly, but intentionally. His life was ordered. Mark chapter 1 verse 35 says, "And in the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place and there prayed." That was not spontaneity. That was structure. Let me say something that may shock you. Faith that refuses to plan is not faith, it is presumption. Faith cooperates with laws. Faith prepares the ground before expecting the harvest. James chapter 2 verse 17 says, "Faith, if it hath not works, is dead." Planning is faith at work. Planning also prepares you for resistance. Every goal will encounter opposition, delay, and distraction. A plan anticipates obstacles before they appear. That is why Nehemiah built the wall with a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. He planned for productivity and protection simultaneously. Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 17 shows us that purpose without strategy invites sabotage. Another principle you must write down: God reveals purpose progressively, but he expects plans immediately. He gives direction in stages, but responsibility is required at every stage. Abraham did not know the final destination, but he still had to pack, organize, and move. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 8 says, by faith Abraham went out not knowing whither he went. Faith did not remove planning. It demanded obedience in motion. Planning also creates accountability. A goal without a timeline is a wish. A vision without milestones cannot be measured. That is why God divided creation into days. Time is not an enemy. Time is a tool. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 says, to everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under heaven. Purpose requires timing, and timing requires planning. Let me make this personal. Many people say, one day I will. One day is not a date. One day never arrives. Planning forces commitment. Planning demands clarity. Planning exposes excuses. That is why many people avoid planning. It removes denial. But until you plan, you remain in imagination. So the sixth kingdom step toward achieving any goal is this. Design a strategic plan that breaks your vision into actionable, measurable, time-bound steps. Write it down, revise it, work it, adjust it, but never abandon it. Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 2 commands us, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. Vision without planning cannot be pursued. Remember this truth. God gives vision, but he demands management. Now hear me carefully, because this step corrects one of the most destructive lies in modern success culture, the lie of self-made greatness. No destiny is fulfilled in isolation. God never designed purpose to be achieved alone. Independence is not strength. Interdependence is God's system. From Genesis to Revelation, God always works through people. Creation itself began with relationship. God said, let us make man in our image. Purpose was born in community. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 verse 9 tells us plainly, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. Reward increases with relationship. Here is a kingdom law you must write down. God will never give you a vision that does not require other people. If your dream can be accomplished by you alone, it is too small. Vision attracts helpers, but discernment selects them. Not everyone who wants to walk with you is assigned to walk with you. Jesus himself did not fulfill his assignment alone. He selected 12, invested in 3, trusted one with finances, and still remained accountable to the Father. That tells you something powerful. Even perfection submitted to process and people. Luke chapter 6 verse 13 says, and when it was day, he called unto him his disciples, and of them he chose 12. He chose intentionally. Let me say this strongly. Wrong people can delay your destiny more than wrong decisions. Samson lost his strength through Delilah. David almost lost his destiny through Saul. Rehoboam lost a kingdom by listening to peers instead of elders. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 33 warns us, be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. People influence direction. The kingdom step here is wisdom in association. You must learn when to connect, when to disconnect, and when to protect your assignment. Purpose determines proximity. Jesus loved the multitudes, taught the 70, trained the 12, mentored the 3, and trusted the 1. Levels matter. So the 7th kingdom step is this: build the right relationships, remove the wrong ones, and honor divine connections. Destiny requires alignment. Now let me prepare you for something no motivation speaker likes to say. If you are on the right path, you will face resistance. Resistance is not a sign to quit. It is a sign you are threatening something. Persistence is not stubbornness. Persistence is disciplined endurance in obedience to purpose. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 36 declares, for ye have need of patience, that after ye have done the will of God, ye might receive the promise. Notice the order. After obedience comes endurance. Many people start well but stop early. They confuse delay with denial. But God often delays manifestation to develop maturity. Joseph had the dream at 17, but entered fulfillment at 30. That delay was not punishment. It was preparation. Here is the law. Every assignment is tested before it is trusted. Persistence proves seriousness. Persistence silences critics. Persistence builds spiritual muscle. Galatians chapter 6 verse 9 commands us, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. So the 8th kingdom step is this: refuse to quit when progress is slow and opposition is loud. Persistence turns vision into testimony. Section 12, step 9, the kingdom step of perseverance. Pain is part of process. Persistence keeps you moving. Perseverance keeps you standing when life hits hard. Perseverance is the ability to absorb pressure without surrendering purpose. Jesus warned us clearly in John chapter 16 verse 33, in the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Tribulation is guaranteed, but victory is promised. Perseverance is not pretending pain does not exist. Perseverance is choosing obedience despite pain. Romans chapter 8 verse 18 says, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Pain has an expiration date. Purpose does not. Those who persevere are not the strongest. They are the most committed. They fall, but they rise. Proverbs chapter 24 verse 16 says, for a just man falleth 7 times and riseth up again. So the 9th kingdom step is this: endure hardship without abandoning your assignment. Perseverance is the bridge between promise and fulfillment. Now I close with the most misunderstood step of all. Prayer is not begging God to do what he already commanded you to do. Prayer is staying connected to the source of purpose. Prayer realigns motives, restores clarity, and renews strength. Isaiah chapter 40 verse 31 declares, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. Waiting does not mean inactivity, it means dependence. Jesus prayed not to escape the cross, but to endure it. Prayer does not remove responsibility, it empowers obedience. Luke chapter 22 verse 42 shows Jesus saying, not my will, but thine be done. Prayer keeps purpose pure. So the final kingdom step is this: maintain constant communion with God, the giver of purpose. Prayer keeps vision alive, passion burning, and direction clear. Final kingdom conclusion. Let me summarize this truth as I end. Goals are achieved not by ambition, but by alignment. Alignment with purpose. Alignment with principles. Alignment with people. Alignment with persistence. Alignment with God. Success is not chasing outcomes, it is obeying laws. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 verse 33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. When you pursue purpose, results pursue you. You were not born to fail. You were not designed to struggle aimlessly. You were created to finish, to fulfill, and to function fully. Discover your purpose, obey the laws, finish your assignment. Amen.